I'd now like to introduce our speakers, Martin Oxley and Ian Weinkselbaum. Ian is Senior Consumer and Market Insights Director at Matern North America, working on the GoGo squeeZ brand. He has over 25 years of experience in both primary research and syndicated data analysis at some of the world's largest CPG manufacturers, including P&G, Bristol Myers Squibb, and Philip Morris. In addition, Ian built and led the market research function at Hart's Mountain Corporation, the country's leading pet supply manufacturer. Ian also has experience in category management and digital marketing. Martin established BuzzBack in Europe in 2007 to exploit the transformational power of the internet, having worked at Ipsos and TNS. He's interested in technology and how it applies to research, but is more interested in people. He's been a regular speaker at ESMR, MRS, and other industry conferences, and has won the Best Case Study at ESMR Congress. In 2009, he was awarded the MRS Fellowship for his outstanding contribution to the UK research industry. Please go ahead, Martin.
Great. Thank you, Matthew, and welcome everyone. So today in the next 35 minutes or so, we're going to cover two sort of big areas. One, which is plant-based and botanicals, what's driving these trends, looking at some research we've undertaken in that area, and also, most importantly, looking at Ian's experience with GoGo squeeZ and how they're driving some of these insights into some of the things that they're doing. So what we'll cover is, I'll say a few things about BuzzBack in the introductions, then I'll touch upon our ingredients journey so far, what I call the ingredients journey, because it's a sort of an amalgam of various things we've done looking at issues related to ingredients. Then some of the research, Ian's important piece about GoGo squeeZ, and then we'll wrap up with some considerations. And then if people have questions, please feel free to put them in the Q&A, as Matthew said, and we'll get to as many of them as we can at the end. So firstly, a little bit about BuzzBack, just one slide, and what we do most importantly. And I think what's interesting is, even though it says here 2 decades of pioneering innovation, this year is our 21 years anniversary. So we've come of age. So Carol's done a great job in establishing the business, and we've been here for 21 years now. And in this time, we focused on helping our clients understand both their current consumers, which is key, because those are the ones that are keeping businesses alive today. But perhaps most interestingly is the future consumer and what they're going to do. And we've developed a series of digital techniques that we use in conjunction with other more conventional research techniques to understand both behaviors and attitudes. But I think one of the things particularly about our attitudinal work is that we focus very hard on understanding that big question, why? The philosophers talk a lot about why, and in our research, we talk a lot about why and motivation, because understanding why people do what they do is key to helping change them. And we help a lot. We work really hard on generating impact. And I heard it said only a few weeks ago, actually, that insight without impact belongs in a library, not in a business. So we're in the business of being in the business and not in a library, if libraries even exist these days. So the 10-year journey that we've been on looking at ingredients and related subjects is shown on this slide here. And it looks a lot simpler than it's been. So we've looked at research on our own money, looking at things like natural, what does natural mean to people? Sustainability, we did that issue with Rainforest Alliance. We've looked at clean label. We've looked at what I'll touch upon later, trendy ingredients, what do people consider trendy? And the focus principally today around things related to plant-based and botanicals. And as you can imagine, a lot of these things are interleaved and connected, especially in the mind of the consumer, who clearly are not experts in product development, but they're certainly experts in buying their own products and what they're looking to achieve. And I don't think this journey is ending anytime soon. In fact, I think we're right at the beginning here, and I think there's a long way to go. And I hope what we'll share today will support that. In addition to our own work, in addition to our own research study, we've worked across a number of different brands, some of which you can see here. We've helped them in food categories, personal care categories, pharmaceutical categories, where there's a sort of blending. And I think one of the things you'll see, and you probably already know, is that the boundaries between things now, I think, are becoming less obvious. We also sit on some advisory boards and have presented at an Informa events like F1 Global Insights and VitaFoods around plant-based and nutrition, and also looked at things like cosmeceuticals, which is a big future potential, I think. But I guess what really excites us as a business is that it's exciting to bring that voice of the consumer, increasingly not a voice, a digital footprint, if you like, but bringing those voices into our clients and some of these media properties. But that's enough about BuzzBack. Now I'll hand over to Ian to say just a few introductory words about his company.
Thank you, Martin. So GoGo squeeZ, we are actually known as GoGo squeeZ in the United States. Our company name, though, is Matern North America. And we've been in the US just a short time, just a little over a decade. Our parent company, the Mom Group, was formed about 20 years ago from the unification of two 100-year-old companies, one focused on fruit and one focused on creating dessert creams and dairy snacks in France. And that unification of Matern North America resulted in a company that is focused on primarily one thing, and that's creating healthy snacks for kids, making kids and their families healthier and happier every day. And to meet that, we are focused on 4 pillars of sustainability. We are first and foremost interested in creating products that are nutritious. We want to make sure that our customers and our employees are that we keep their well-being in mind. That as we do this, we do it in a way that is good for the world and the environment, and that also includes supporting sustainable farming. Next slide, Mark. So this is a brief video that'll give you, I guess, a little insight as to how the environment plays into our creation of products. So I think that gave you a little insight as to how we think about it and how we approach our mission, which is we care about making healthy snacking available to families by offering healthier, tastier, and more fun products designed in a responsible way from the best of nature. And in order to do that, we focus on healthy products, high quality ingredients, and doing it with lots of passion. This has been the recipe of our success. And interestingly enough, it's also the philosophy of our now largest shareholder in our company, which is Bell Brands, which is also a company over 100 years old and is now a leader not only in dairy, but also in non-dairy and plant-based dairy alternative products. We share that mission with them, and it's been a great partnership so far. Next slide.
Great. Okay, thanks, Ian.
Yep.
I was rocking in the aisles to that music, I must admit. So I guess really one of the things we want to do here is just, and I'm sure there are people on this call who are far more expert than us in this area, but just really to try and separate out what plant-based is and botanicals, because one of the things you'll see in a moment is they kind of get confused a little. So you can see here plant-based, made from synthetic-free, potentially also botanicals. And on the right hand side, botanical is the sort of active ingredients, if you like, the substance obtained from a plant which offers those sort of medicinal properties. And there is, as you can see, a bit of confusion, and I think I just even fell over my words because I get confused very often about it. But I think what really, this isn't such a big deal, because as we hope to demonstrate through the rest of the deck, these overlaps actually are all consistent and pointing really pretty much in the same direction. But now actually a little bit of a test for the audience. So don't worry, it's not going to be painful, because where would be the fun in that? But actually the products you can see on here, and don't type in, there's a moment when I'll ask you to type in about something else, but I'd just like you to reflect on these products here and just think, it's more of a rhetorical question, which of these products are actually plant-based? And just take a few moments to look at them and give some thought to that. And of course, those of you that know me better will know it's a trick question, of course, and they're all plant-based. But the one particularly that I wanted to point out to you, my favorite, of course, being GoGo squeeZ, but my second favorite is the, as you guys in the States call them sneakers, top left, or trainers, as we would call them in the UK. These were pointed out to me by Carol, our CEO, and they're called Bloom Lane 8 shoes, and they are madly made from algae. Just, can you believe it, made of algae? It's an extraordinary thought. But now I'd like you to just answer a question, and this is a proper question, not a rhetorical one, and I'd like you to type in to the chat your answer to this question. And this is an important question as well as a little bit of fun. So to type into the chat window the answers to this question, you don't have to be 100% right, as I'm sure many of you won't be, but how many new species of plants do you think are discovered every year? So the question again, how many new species of plants are discovered every year? So could you just type that into the chat? And I'd ask Matthew in a few seconds if you can just read out maybe the highest one, maybe the lowest one, and a few in between. Matthew, give us a sense of what people's guesses are.
Very good, actually, on the whole. I'm impressed. Way better than my guesses were when you asked me earlier in the week, Martin. So we've got 2000 was the first guess which came in, which is amazing, as you know, when you reveal the answer. We've got someone who said 500. We've got a 5,000, which is nearer my my astronomical guess. But yeah, so good on the whole, and one very precise one of 2653, which is actually very good.
I think they're on Google. I can't believe it. But anyway, I was amazed by this. I was listening into a wonderful podcast by an Italian professor, and he mentioned this. So over the last 15 years, the average is the range is between 2,100 and 2,600, which I just think is an extraordinary number of new species to science. The other downside of that, of course, apparently there are some species that they think are being destroyed that we will never know existed, but they're finding new ones. And I think this, for me, is part of why I think where we're going is somewhere really amazing with plant-based and botanicals and so on. So now to get into some of the research for the next few minutes, and really meeting consumers, humans, and we're all those, where they're going. And there's been a lot of talk about plant-based products and botanicals, and we've done some of it ourselves, and it's everywhere if you go and Google it. But one of the things I said right at the beginning is at BuzzBack, we're really interested in not just where people are or consumers are, but where they've come from and also where they're going. And that really is this section here. Where is this kind of momentum? And if you look for some sort of official statistics, and I'm this presentation isn't about official statistics. It's just to give a flavor. Excuse the accidental pun about food that comes later. But the global botanicals market has been valued at just under 100 billion US 2020, and with a reasonably strong growth, as you can see here. And a particular key driver of this has been plant-based proteins, which are growing even more significantly. And I think this is really interesting, that the market, financially is growing. Consumer perceptions are getting more positive, and this is a global phenomenon. And so one of the things now, what I want to do is just weave into the conversation some of the research that we've done. And what I'm showing on the slide here is just, we've done work in the US, in the UK, and China. Not every slide is from all of those markets, but the more eagle-eyed of you will be able to see at the bottom left somewhere where the reference is. But what I'm trying to do is just weave the narrative, if you like, from some of those different pieces of work. So the first thing, kind of what's top of mind? What are people thinking of, and what are their sources of influence and knowledge? Well, one of the things we did was throw the net as wide as we could. So, how could we ask a question that threw it as wide as possible? So what we asked people is around top of mind, trendy ingredients. So, what are you hearing? What are you seeing, in terms of this bucket of trendy ingredients? And what's interesting, some of these, to many of you, especially the person who guessed the number of new species so accurately, they will think this is really old news. But this is where the consumer sentiment is at the moment. And the sorts of trendy ingredients people are encountering, you can see in this wordle. So coconut, charcoal, CBD is popping, the ever-present CBD. But I think what's interesting is all of these ingredients are in some shape or form natural, plant-based, and a lot of them center on food items. But you'll see later, as well as in other work that's being done, many of them have personal care applications as well. So, what you can consume and what you can also wear. And you probably won't surprise that some of the primary sources of information and awareness about these trendy ingredients fall into these kind of three buckets. Principally, again, no surprises, social media. And although we haven't tracked this across time, I don't see this going away anytime soon. Family and friends, second, and then paid for media broadly, the third bucket. But of course, the issue, as we all know with social media, is the sort of trustworthiness. What are people learning? What do they know? So what we wanted to do here is look at some sort of more prompted questions, if you like, because our sense is that there's more at a top level awareness, but little depth of knowledge. And as you can see here, when prompted on the left-hand side about these ingredients, about a third of people, US, UK, claim a good understanding of these ingredients, while about 2/3 were only aware of the name. So the names are familiar, but not necessarily any more than that. However, for me, what was intriguing was about half of the people were aware and open to try. So higher levels, if you like, of awareness than knowledge. And I think this is really intriguing because I consider this as positive. People are open to these ideas. And I guess this isn't really a surprise, since the motivations for trying these ingredients among those that do know, and indeed among those that are less familiar, the motivations for trying are very broad, but all of them incredibly positive. And you can see here, again, talking about these kind of trendy ingredients, if you like, stress relief, CBD falling into that bucket particularly, personal care benefits at a secondary level, and then this sort of more holistic health and wellness. And I think really this, for me, is particularly intriguing, that we're seeing multiple perceived benefits. It's almost like a holistic. And that's why I use the title human. It's not about consumer. It's like the whole thing. It's not about this or that. It's actually about me. It's about bringing these things together. And so switching to plant-based now for a moment, when you then get people, for example, to tell you a story about what plant-based products, in this case, my next slide, about plant-based protein, In addition to some of the functional benefits, people also describe the emotional benefits, and that I'd like to just focus on this next slide. So here are a couple of collages that consumers put together about plant-based protein. The first, you can see plant-based proteins supply my body with nutrition needed to fuel my daily activity, and so on. So you can see here, this is very sort of functional food as fuel, natural, and all good positive stuff. And notice her reference and other bad things. So she's focusing, this is good, it's not bad. But I want to draw your attention particularly to the second one. This is my favorite. It's sad as a market researcher to have favorite verbatums, but I do. So here she said, when eating plant-based proteins, I feel free of guilt, happy, like a superhero, like I'm saving the earth, standing out in a crowd. And then she goes on talking about colors. And I just wanted to reflect on that a moment and just thought, wow, let's face it, who doesn't really want to be a superhero? I always aspired to be Spider-Man. But I think the problem with me and superheroes is the lycra. The lycra has always been the challenge, especially during lockdown, where I'm not going to admit to my weight gain. What I'm going to say is that my washing is shrinking my clothing. But this, I think, is intriguing. This person feels like a superhero. And this for me is just is such an interesting idea. She's moving away from just her towards what she can do for the planet as well as herself. But more of that later. So now I want to touch upon botanicals specifically. And as you saw earlier, plant-based and botanicals have different nuanced meanings, and sometimes they get confused. So here we look to UK, US, and China, and the elderflower, garlic, cranberry, ginseng, ginkgo biloba, not an easy thing to say, I had to write it down, are the most popular botanicals in those three markets. But there is a hierarchy, as you can see here, and some subtle differences. Elderflower popping in the UK, cranberry more in the US, and ginkgo in China. So some sort of local strengths. But I think for me, this suggests these subtle nuances, but also the potential for international expansion. And as we all know, the globe is getting smaller. And so finding these new plant species, as we've described, and these new opportunities can just go around the globe that much more quickly. But by usage, garlic, cranberry, ginseng were high, with only about 30% of people not using or claiming not to use a botanical of some form. So really high levels of penetration and interest and awareness. And we're seeing that it's growing as well. So interest in botanicals is about 70% in US and UK and 90% in China. And those of you that will know the Chinese market will know it has very different historical foundations, certainly to the US and the UK. So there are different historical foundations here, but their interests are very high. And interest is also higher than awareness, which sort of marries what we saw earlier, suggesting that the idea of botanicals has more appeal than knowledge. And we think this is particularly exciting as well. So to try and get an idea as well about trends, we asked people if they had heard more about the term compared with 2 years ago. 40% said yes, UK, US, 80% in China. And then 55% and 80% expecting to hear more in the future. So this, although not a tracking study, gives you a sense of the momentum and the acceleration. So in terms of motivations for consumption of both plant-based and botanicals, this is the sort of bringing together, if you like. And I think what's intriguing for me is that there's both the ego, as I call it, the reasons that are good for me, health, this is about me, but also the eco, animals, environment. So it's like now the botanicals and plant-based are starting to come together to fill this eco gap, if you like. So now just a last little section before I hand back to Ian. So what are people's interests and really what are they trying when it comes to broader plant-based rather than the focus I've just been describing? And what you can see here, UK, US again, only about 13% are not interested in plant-based products. I'm not convinced that that figure's that high. Actually, I think it's probably lower, but just as a pure statement, because I got a feeling that most of those people are using plant-based in some capacity. They just don't quite know what it is. But the things that they would consider purchasing are shown here, both personal care products, what I put in me, and food products, what I put in me. But interestingly, the one that kind of stands out here perhaps is makeup and hair care being lower. And we've seen this in other work, particularly work we've done around natural, that there is a sort of perceived question mark over efficacy when it comes to products that are perceived as natural, even if the product itself is sourced naturally. And this particularly applies to medicinal products. But I can imagine over time that efficacy being addressed. So now just to focus back again on botanicals and the source of botanicals. So UK, US, often in our research, we see very close similarities. And here we're seeing supplements are the most popular, food products in US and UK, followed by drinks, dairy products, candy, and so on. And in China, similar but a nuanced difference. Supplements are also popular along with dairy and functional foods. So finally, then, I just want to summarize looking at botanicals across both personal care and also food, and look at where people are sort of getting the trigger from. And here you can see, again, merging UK, US together, an interest in the botanical ingredients is actually stronger from the personal care category in the US and UK, whereas in China, it's a similar story, but less pronounced. So that's a bit of a whistle-stop tour through some of our data. And I just really wanted to finish on something that we identified that was launched a few years ago by Givaudan, this adaptogenes, which is a botanical solution made of different botanical extracts, lots of different things in here. But what I was intrigued by this when I saw it is that I wasn't sure whether to put it on my hair or to eat it. It looks good enough to eat. And maybe that's part of the thing, that food and personal care with botanicals and plant-based are kind of coming together. So now I'll hand over to Ian to talk about GoGo squeeZ.
Thank you, Martin. I think next slide, right? So we have. There we go. Thank you. Yeah, so speaking about things that are good enough to eat. How does a company that essentially is really plant-based from the get-go, right? We produce products that are 100% plant-based. It's applesauce, it's apples and other fruits. How do we take advantage of a trend that we really have been living for a long time? Well, we sort of set out on this adventure to expand our franchise. Not so much focused on plant-based, but focused on a growing trend for an interest in functional benefits in people's foods. But we wanted to do that in a way that was actually consistent with also the growing trend for plant-based. And in this case, we developed a product called Happy Tummies, which provides prebiotic fiber to consumers, which helps lead to a healthy gut. And again, that's a trend that's growing as well. We worked with BuzzBack in this particular case to test a variety of potential ingredients that we were putting into this product and a variety of claims that we knew we wanted to make, as well as assess some of the competitive claims that some of competitor products were making. And we did this for both kids and for their parents, because we wanted to make sure products that ultimately taste good, but that the parent is willing to pull off the shelf. And now Happy Tummies is one of our best-selling new products on the market. Next slide. Now this was truly a venture into the trend on plant-based, because now what we're recently launched is a non-dairy product that is made from oat milk, or rather, excuse me, almond milk, and it's the first non-dairy pudding available for kids. Again, working with BuzzBack this time, we set out to actually understand how non-dairy products fit into people's lives. We did that through a digital ethnography to understand what parents were looking for, what they thought their kids would like. And clearly one of the things that we saw as an opportunity was an indulgent product that met the plant-based needs of this consumer segment. In addition, we needed to provide functional benefits once again. And so we needed to make sure that this product included things that they were looking for, such as calcium and protein in their products. And again, doing it in a natural and plant-based way. Next slide. And then finally, not everything we do is driven by the consumer, but is driven by us being brand stewards and stewards of the earth. And we know that we need to be mindful of the impact that our products have on the environment. And we've undergone a multi-year journey to update and improve our packaging, starting out with removing aluminum from all of our fruit products. There was an aluminum layer in the pouch, and we've removed that to reduce the amount of raw materials that we're using. And then most recently, we've launched a new cap, and you can actually see in this photo how it is thinner than our traditional or our original cap. It actually reduced the amount of plastic we use by 40%. And net, it actually is 80% less plastic than most of our competitors' caps. And this was a trend that we picked up on. Obviously, there's a growing awareness about the environmental impact of packaging among consumers, but this wasn't anything that anybody was calling our hotline and asking for. This was nothing that any consumers mentioned. This was us really acting on our own behalf to try and get ahead of and be the responsible brand stewards that we are. Martin?
Great. Thank you, Ian. So now really just to sort of wrap up some of the themes, and please, if you have questions, make sure they go into the Q&A. So at a very high level, you can see some of the things we've kind of touched upon. Health is that kind of primary sort of driver, things like taste and health reasons, but there are also other things depending on category that we couldn't quite cover fully today. And I think those things for me that I'm intrigued by is the sort of coming together of botanicals and plant-based, but also this eco dynamic. And I think companies that get that right, what's good for me and good for the planet, let's face it, it's hard to imagine what would go wrong there. And so I think some of the broad level opportunities here is, of course, this triggering of health and wellness, looking at different audiences, but never forgetting. We did a project for a big food company, and one of the things they said to me was, we just kind of forgot that taste was so critical because they'd been focusing on so many other things. So it can't afford to taste bad, that is for sure. Then, of course, in personal care, there is this overlap. You saw some of this, efficacy being a consideration. And the point clearly that Ian touched upon, good corporate citizens are already doing this even without the consumer demand. And so, getting there ahead of that. And so I guess really the final slide before we get to any questions is, if there is a roadmap for this journey, these are just 4 big chunks as we kind of see it, sort of starting with your existing property. What is it that your brand owns, and what are consumer perceptions of it? Trying to understand the opportunities where you are, where you want to go, to test and differentiate your ideas to make sure they're on strategy and on brand. And then, of course, very easy for me to say, when you've done those first 3 steps, go and launch it, as with GoGo squeeZ, and get it into the hands of consumers and delight them. So thank you everyone for your attention. Now there is an opportunity to hopefully ask some questions of Ian or indeed myself. So Matthew, could you tell us if there are any questions for us?
Yes, we do have a few questions, and keep them coming, everybody, just in case we have time to cover those. And if we don't have time to do, we will be following up afterwards. But somebody asks if you could talk a bit about the differences between plant-based and vegan.
Right. Ian, I don't know whether I can throw that to you, or whether you'd like to throw it back. Whether you'd like to throw it back.
Well, we produce things obviously that are both plant-based and some of which are vegan. And we have dairy products in our line which obviously are not vegan. But you know, for us, there obviously is a trend that not only is there interest in plant-based diets, but vegan diets we know are growing. That said, for us, it would still be a relatively niche segment within our consumer base. We have products that meet those needs, but we're not going to be exclusively vegan going forward. We do believe in dairy. I can't speak to things beyond kids' snacks, so I don't know if there's anything you might add, but I'm not sure if I've answered the question completely for the person, but for us, we know that there are unique consumer needs. We try to address those through a range of our product portfolio.
Great. And I think, of course, as well, we're seeing a lot of meat replacement that is not really targeted at vegans per se, but targeted at meat eaters who are just reducing the amount of meat as well. So, we're seeing that everywhere. And I think certainly some of the products I've tried, the performance is really very good. Yeah. I think satisfying that meat, please.
Actually, to build on that, I know some of the research that we've done around plant-based, and when you ask consumers about plant-based, I do think there is a bias to go immediately to meat alternatives. And maybe that's a bit of a challenge for us as a company that's not involved in the meat industry, and so we're not producing meat alternatives. But I think plant-based, like I think you said earlier in the presentation, means different things to different people.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Ian. Matthew, I'm not sure whether we answered, but is there another question in the time available?
Yes, and thank you for that answer. And so somebody's asking, how does organic claims fit into the plant-based space? I'm assuming consumers who are plant-driven also care about whether the product is organic as well.
Yeah, wow, that's a big question to unpack, isn't it? I think, I think that one of the things we said right at the beginning, there's a lot of mixing of these things, and what's vegan, what's vegetarian, what's plant-based, and is it substitution, and so on. But I think the work that we've done and we've shared, I think identifies that people are starting to be interested more. Even though the slides I showed that knowledge was somewhat behind awareness. So I'm not sure whether I'm answering this question fully or whether I'm just ducking it completely. But I think obviously these things are connected, and the natural piece we did some time ago now certainly addressed that. So if the person's interested, we could share that.
I can throw in just our experience that organic often comes at an expense, and certainly when we're dealing with kids' snacks and trying to serve the needs as many people as possible, economics does come into play, and delivering plant-based products that aren't organic and don't come at that premium is still an important thing for us to do, because there is a growing segment of the population that's interested in plant-based but may not be able to afford the organic premium.
Thank you. If the person who submitted that question does want that natural study, just send us an email to info@buzzback.com and we can send you that. We have another couple of questions. What advice would you give to someone embarking on a journey of understanding like the one you've described today?
Well, of course they'd come send the brief to us, and then we would. No, joking aside, Ian, I'm sure that's for you, because you've been on this journey, and it's clearly a challenging one.
Yeah, so if I were to use our our pudding example, where we were starting really from scratch. It was a new category for us. I mean, again, our French company has a heritage in developing dairy desserts, but really getting into indulgent snacks in the US was something completely new. So we really started at the bottom, tried to get a real understanding of what's happening in the category, and the category being, broadly food and bev, to understand some of the trends, understand some of the performances of our potential competitors, and then getting down and dirty with consumers. I mentioned the digital ethnography that we did to really understand how these products fit into their lives, what needs they're meeting, what hurdles they might exist to being brought into consideration. And then for us, probably the biggest hurdle, and I think you talked about this, Martin, was developing a product that tastes good. In the case of kids snacks, it's different than an adult, right? As an adult, I can make the conscious decision to accept maybe something that tastes a little less good if it's better for me, if it's better for the world. But my kid, on the other hand, my kid is not going to turn around and say, I'm okay with this snack tasting a little less good than the other one because I'm doing something good for myself. It needs to taste good, and being able to develop that item that met that hurdle was probably our biggest challenge.
Great. Thanks, Ian.
I hear that one as well, Ian, as the father of an 8-year-old. There's just one last question we have time for. And as I said, we will follow up with people whose questions we didn't get to. But do you think consumers are thinking in a holistic way about the benefits of plant-based products?
I think certainly from the work I shared, I think people are. I wouldn't be able to put a number on what percentage, but I think you saw when people are talking about plant-based, they're even talking about botanicals, they're talking about multiple different benefits, both to themselves, but also the eco piece. So I think that, what I describe eco, that's holistic. It's not just them, but also when you're talking about them, they're talking about some of the rational benefits. The lady talking about no bad, talking about fueling herself, and then someone also talking about some of the mental health benefits of CBD and so on. So I think yes, and I think it's only going to get stronger where people start to see the interconnections as well. And I'm always, many years ago, someone told me that, the active ingredient, and I think it was in anodin, was derived from the willow tree, which I just didn't know. And I just thought, wow, this is intriguing that something like that, which is an analgesic, is derived naturally. And so I think a growing awareness of these things, for me, there's only one way, and as people get more knowledgeable. Ian, I don't know if you can add to what I've just said.
Yeah, really, I would just concur. I mean, I think that the trend is to becoming more and more holistic in your thinking about what you put into your body. And again, I'm maybe focused again on foods, but the awareness of the impacts of the agricultural industry on the environment, the awareness of packaging on the environment is growing, and it may not be at a critical point yet, but as I've seen over the past few years, something like prebiotics was an unknown thing 4 years ago, and today it's a pretty common term used by consumers. So I would imagine the awareness is going to grow, and the consideration of how products are developed and produced is going to grow and be an important factor in consumer choice.
Thank you. As mentioned, that's all the questions we have time for, but just before we go, we're just going to put up some contact details on the screen. If you'd like to get in touch, ask any questions about the content or indeed the methodology, and a few examples of some resources on our website, like the study we've just presented. There's lots of resources and studies there. And we look forward to seeing you on a webinar in the future. Thanks very much, Martin. Thanks very much, Ian, for joining us today. We appreciate it. And thanks to our audience for joining. See you soon.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.